Good day, everyone, and welcome back to Mommy Guide Inc. For those who are new to the channel, I am Mommy Lala, and welcome to day number 5 of Craft Every Day in August. Yes, we started this series to actually revisit the basics of crafting, specifically paper crafting, but we'll try our best to cover our other crafts as well. So we covered the different basic tools for different crafts on day one. And then we also covered the basics of paper and then also die cutting machines. All right. And today we're going to be covering inks. Yes, specifically inks for paper crafting for stamping and blending purposes only. All right, so other kinds like the ones we use for mixed media, we will cover when we go over the basics of mixed media. So if you are a newbie, so to speak, or you're just starting out with paper crafting and you don't know where to start or what are the different kinds of inks, and you do have a specific requirement, I hope that this episode hopefully helps you out. And if you know anyone who is actually a beginner or who want to actually start paper crafting or crafting in itself, yes, maybe you could share this video to them and lead them to Mommy Guide Inc. And later on, when other crafters come in the chat, I'm sure that you will also learn from those who come in the chat, because most of them actually also have channels or are on Instagram, and most of them are crafters as well. All right, so just like I mentioned, today is all about inks. All right, so let's start. Hey, hi Linda. Good morning. I hope that the results from yesterday was okay. Thank you so much for dropping by, my friend, and for being here early. Yes, I know at this point, I think you have to walk your fur baby, right? And yes, she's saying hi also to Sammy. All right, so for today, it's all about inks. Okay. So, what are inks for paper crafting? Okay. So ink, okay, not the one that you use for printing purposes for your printers. All right. Although we use that when we want to print something for our, crafty needs, right? But this one is more for stamping and blending purposes, right? So ink is actually a medium made of colorants. Okay, the colorants may be made of dye or pigment. Okay, so a liquid carrier which may often have or contain water or oil or any other solvent. Plus other dry and they vary, and they have other additives which actually affects the drying time, the opacity, and texture. Okay, so for paper crafting, this is basically the top two. Okay, so you have your dye-based inks and your pigment-based inks. All right. Next. Okay. 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 So I think for artists, like the traditional artists, we will cover that in a different episode. Okay. So a brief history of inks. Okay. So in the 20th century, okay, craft boom, so to speak. So in the 1970s and in the 80s, scrapbooking and stamping communities grew. Okay, especially in the US, creating demand for archival, fade resistant inks that wouldn't damage your photos. Okay, so actually, that's when I also started. Okay, so of course, it started earlier than this. It's the 1800s. It's just that I wanted to do the very recent one when we actually, most of us actually just started. So within this time between the 1970s and 80s, and then the modern era, meaning today. Okay, crafters can choose from water-based dye inks, pigment inks, and yes, we do have hybrid inks, and especially inks in a rainbow of colors. Gone are the days when you only have black and oftentimes white. Now you can have a rainbow and of colors, all designed for specific crafting effects, from clean stamping to water reactive blending. All right. So if you are here, okay, would you? I have actually a poll in the chat asking you, okay, about what is your favorite or your go-to ink for crafting. You may share the actual brand if you want, or the general category, whether it's pigment, it's dye, or it is a hybrid one. Hybrid is a combination of both the pigment and the dye ink. All right. Okay, hold on. Let me just go back to the chat before I proceed because I see something. Okay, for Sammy, it is pigment inks. What is happening to my chat? Okay, so yes, so choose yours in the chat. Okay, I got out of a sling, but can't use that arm yet. Just exercise. Oh, okay, okay. I hope you feel better soon. Okay, and hopefully, you can just watch and relax. Okay, this episode is going to be quite short as we're just going to be featuring the basics of ink. So, the first week or so, okay, we will just be featuring basic tools and supplies. And then after that, we will move on to the basic techniques. All right. So there. So Sammy said, Q with a colon. Yes, if you do have a question so I can easily see it, put Q colon. Okay, so what is your favorite or go-to ink for crafting? And it is in that chat. All right. So a brief history about the inks. Okay, again. Okay. So now you can have it in all different colors and sizes actually. So let's start first with the dye inks. All right. So these are the most common and the easiest actually ink to use. So if you are a beginner and you want, more or less crisp images when you stamp, okay, this is actually, and when you blend, this is the best one for you. So for a beginner, I would suggest that you get yourself a dye ink first. Okay, a dye-based ink. All right, because it's actually water-based, it's fast drying, and it's great for crisp stamping and layering. When I did stamping before for scrapbooking, I was so disappointed because um then there were no stamping platforms and stuff. So we'll go into that later on when we talk about stamping, right? And there was a very limited inks that you can actually choose from. But now there is a plethora of options. So we're all very happy, right? So the different brands, for example, you have your distress inks actually are more of a mixed one already. You have Memento, also a hybrid one. Altenew, okay, yes, the Altenew are actually crisp dye inks, and several others. I will actually show you later on. Okay, so let me see. Hold on. Do I have it here? Do I have it here? Okay, hold on. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. I thought I lost it. Okay, it's here. It's here. All right. And we have Bethel. Hi, sis. How are you doing? Good evening. I don't know the difference. Here to learn. Thank you so much, Sis Bethel. All right. So you're still up, a little bit late for you tonight, my friend. All right. So hope I impart a little bit of knowledge because we can actually use this is for our faith or Bible journaling. All right. Next is types of inks. By the way, my friends, Night Apple K-pop. Okay, she's a content creator on YouTube and she does a lot of K-pop contents, right? So if you're interested in that, please do check her channel out. All right, so the next kind of inks are what we call your pigment inks. All right. So what are pigment inks? Inks are thicker, slow drying, unlike the dye inks, and they're very vibrant. Okay, so that's one of the things that I like about the pigment inks. Okay, they sit on top of the paper and they're great for embossing as well because they heat embossing because they dry slower than that of the dye ink, where after you stamp it, it's already dry, so you can no longer do a lot of techniques with it. Okay, so examples of which are your Versacolor, Versaclear, Color Box, and Brilliance. All right. And then we have next your hybrid inks. Okay. So hybrid, from the word itself, it's hybrid. It's a combination. It has some properties of your dye-based inks and your pigment inks, right? So it's versatile for many surfaces. That's why, let's say, if you are unsure if it's gonna work with one or both, okay, so you may want to go for a hybrid ink. But again, test it still before you actually dive into using it, right? Example of which are my favorite things, hybrid ink, Pink Fresh Studio, and many others. I will show you examples and all of this in a little bit. Let's just do the theoretical first, right? And you have the solvent inks, all right? So from the word itself, solvent, so most of these inks, they do have a smell like that of a solvent. So, and these are permanent, fast drying, and works on non-porous surfaces like glass, plastic, right? So any non-porous surface and you want to stamp, okay, so this is the kind of ink that you use, okay? The solvent ink, like your Stays-Ons. All right. And finally, you have your embossing inks. Okay, embossing is another process that I will show you later on, right? So where you actually create texture, or you create you lift somehow the stamped image or words, okay? And to do that, so you use a, what do they call this, embossing powders, and to hold the embossing powders, you normally use embossing inks. Okay, they are sticky, and most of the time they're clear or tinted, okay, for heat embossing. Normally we use the clear so that whatever color embossing powder you use, you can, okay, unless you actually have a pigment ink where you, and it's colored, then since it dries pretty slower or slow, then you can actually use that also as an embossing ink. Examples of which, of course, top at the top is your Versamark, and of course your Ranger Emboss It. All right. So then, of course, finally you have your specialty inks. Okay, so this is a favorite of so many paper crafters, and this is the Distress Oxides line of the Ranger, specifically Tim Holtz's line, right? Although nowadays there are actually many already specialty inks, but Tim Holtz has like about 70 plus colors, okay, for the Distress ink and oxide lines. It's most no more normally reactive with water, meaning if you splatter, or I mean if you spray it with a little water, or if you tap a little bit of water, it can move. So there are many techniques that you can do with this kind of ink. That's why it became so popular. Okay, so and also you have your alcohol inks and your chalk inks, okay, which I will show you later. All right. So before we go into the storage, okay, first let's go back to the chat, okay, and then I will show you now the different kinds of inks. All right. So hi, good evening, Wims. And Wims is saying good evening to everybody. And we have hello, my friend. Thank you so much for dropping by. Oh, yes, a blessed day to you as well. Thank you so much. What a lovely smile on your avatar. Thank you, my friend. It Dyer. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And of course, we have our dear Mr. Roy himself, tech troublemaker. Ink that is a pigment. That's a pigment of my imagination. Yes, can be, right? I love Roy. See, there's no dull moment with Roy. So if you actually missed Roy's live stream last night for you guys, and it was early morning for me, please head on to his channel and check out the amazing interview he had with Jill of Ecamm, right? Ecamm, of course, is also the platform that Mommy Guide Inc. uses for everything that I do, whether it be video, recorded video, shorts, and even, of course, live streams. Okay, so Wim says, okay, my favorite is dye ink. Okay, because I can use it as a coloring medium and I love the smooshing technique. Right? Yes. Okay, absolutely. Okay, so maybe for those of you, you are now really like excited to see. Okay, can we see some of those dyes? All right. Okay, some of those inks rather. All right. So here I have different kinds of inks. So let's start first with the easiest and the one that I suggest. So if you are a beginner, just like what Wim said, the easiest to maneuver with and to work with is dye ink. Wims is actually an artist, so she is very familiar with using inks and different medium. But for paper crafting, she does also prefer dye inks. There is a lot, or there are lots of brands out there. But here are some, okay, of the ones that I actually use. All right. So this is called the Altenue. Okay, the Altenue Crisp Dye Ink. Okay, so if you would see, most of my dyes are in ink cubes. Okay, the reason for which is because when they introduced the concept of this size, okay, because it's cheaper. So I can get more colors, or I can actually get the whole collection rather than buying the full size pad. Right? So that's why I prefer them to be in cubes. All right. So this is one brand. It's Altenue Crisp Dye Inks. Okay. One thing I like about Altenue, if you would see, okay, the colors are, they are very nice. Okay. So you can see the transition in the different kinds of blues and pinks and reds. So I love that, especially if you want to do a little bit of blending. So it's perfect. And normally they release it in batches of 4. So this 4 absolutely, they're perfect to blend with each other. So it's a no-brainer. They already give you like a collection that you can start with if you want. So you can buy them in something like this as well. But this is Hero Arts. Okay, so this is another brand. Again, they just look the same because they come in, basically the same size. So this is another dye ink. It's Hero Arts. It's actually one of the very first inks that I had, Hero Arts, because Hero Arts before was actually the one who started with the stamps that are, what do you call this? One of, not just them, but the red rubber stamps. Okay, so I have several of this. Okay, another favorite of mine, just simply because of the colors, okay, is the Lawn Fawn. Okay, again, the Lawn Fawn, okay, it's called Lawn Fawn Fundamentals. Lawn Fundamentals Premium Dye Ink. That's what they call their inks. Okay, so if you could see, again, the colors. Okay, I love the different shades and hue. So you have the different grays, different yellows, pinks. All right. So I'll talk to you about how I store them in a little bit. Okay. Now I'm just showcasing. All right. And then, of course, we have Gina K. All right. So Gina K is a pioneering crafter as well. She has an amazing line of not just inks, but also stamps, machines, dyes, and so many other things. Now, if you would check, okay, this is what the dye ink would look like. All right, the pad. So it's kind of stiff. Okay, it's not squishy. Okay, so dye inks come in pads like that. Okay, and normally, if you could hear, so there's like the closure somehow. You will hear a click when it's closed, right? So make sure that once you use them, that you actually make sure that it's absolutely closed so that it won't dry up. Okay, again, we will talk about the storage in a little bit. So that's your Gina K. So we're still in the dye inks. Okay, so, and then there is this bigger, okay, line of Altenew crisp inks. Okay, so not just this one, but the bigger ones. So they also come in like different shades. So for blending purposes. Okay, I'm just showcasing some of what I have. And then another Altenew one. Okay, this is actually going later because this is a hybrid one. Okay, and then you have another brand that a lot of crafters really love. This is the Catherine Puller because again, look at the colors. It's so pretty, right? So not just your regular black and blue, not just your regular rainbow. Okay, even the colors in between, right? So amazing and beautiful. Okay. And then, of course, you also have some dye inks that actually are like this one, ombre. So from dark, medium, lightest. Okay. So this is Hero Arts. So it comes in bigger pads like this one. Again, it's stiff. Okay. It's not squishy. Okay, so that is what you know that it is actually a dye ink. All right, so let's move on to the next kind, which is your pigment ink. Okay, so for when you do your stamping and then you do letters, right? So you start sentiments, words. I love using pigment inks. Okay, for one, okay, hold on. I will just have to remove this. Okay, hold on. Okay, so I can have space for for the pigment inks. All right. So remember what pigment inks are. So they're normally they dry slower. Okay, so these are your pigment inks. Okay. Of course, your Versamarks are pigment inks. Okay. And this one are also pigment inks. All right. So these are, so I have more dye inks than pigment inks. Again, because as I mentioned, dye inks are actually easier to maneuver better or to maneuver or to work with than pigment inks. Okay, hold on. This is covering my light. So I have to lower this. All right. Okay. So this one. Okay. So this is one of the brands of pigment ink. It's called VersaFine. Okay. So for VersaFine, this is the best one for me for sentiments because no matter how intricate, how thin the sentiment is, it's always very, very vibrant and awesome. What is stamping? Okay, I always get very crisp stamping images with the VersaFine. But since it's pigment, all right, so it dries slowly. So there are techniques, that you may not use this for. All right, so we will talk about that when we go through the different kinds of techniques where we will be using different kinds of inks later on. So there's the VersaFine, and then you also have the VersaColor. Okay, so this one, look at the vibrancy of the colors, right? So, and if you would check, so the ink pads are softer. Okay, so it's squishy. Okay. Unlike the other one where it's very, very hard. Okay, so the ink pads are squishy. Okay, and normally it's very juicy, right? So when you press on it, look at the ink. All right, so you can actually get a lot of ink easily. All right, so that's the VersaColor. And of course, my go-to is the VersaFine Black. So I have several of those. Okay, and then your white. Okay, so there are actually specific techniques for the white ink, especially if you're working with dark cardstocks. So this is the white pigment ink that I love the best. Okay, either this or this one, the Dough Crafts. Okay, so these two are my go-to white pigment inks. Okay, so again, best for when you're doing techniques with dark colored cardstocks. All right. And then, of course, your archival inks. Okay. Safe for scrapbooking, memory keeping. Yes, this is your archival inks. And because they are actually pigment inks, they're not dye inks, but they are pigment inks. Okay. So they have the archival. Okay. And then, of course, your VersaFine Clear. Okay. So the newer versions of the VersaFine. Okay. So bigger, a little bit bigger. Okay. So it's not as squishy. Okay, as the others. So it comes also in different colors. So if you can see, there are different sizes, different shapes. So sometimes storage could be a little bit tricky, right? But I'll show you later on how. And of course, you have your Versamark. Okay, so it's also a pigment ink, the one you use for heat embossing. So if you will see, it does look like dark, right? But actually, because I used this for Christmas and I actually contaminated it. But normally it looks like this, right? So it's white or it's clear. All right. And then this is what you use for when you do your heat embossing. So this is a delicata. It's a pigment ink. It does white shimmer. So when you heat emboss, when you stamp it, there's a little bit of shimmer. All right. So then this is another pigment ink by Dough Crafts, but it is in blue. All right. So those are the pigment inks. Okay. So now let's go to the other kinds of inks. Okay. And let's go to, okay, let's push it there. Okay. And let's go to the specialty inks. Okay. So these are basically like your hybrid inks. Okay. So like this one, Altenew came up with a new line. Okay. For mixed media. Okay. So these are water-based. It can give you detailed impression. And yes, it's also a pigment ink. Okay. So just like the others. Okay, that we showed you. Okay, this one, from Crafting Chemie, Glorious Grapefruit is what it's called, this color. Okay, and this is a hybrid one. Okay, so great for doing different techniques as well. Okay, and then some other specialty inks. Okay, so you have like the Gina K and the My Favorite Things. All right, so I do have a bigger versions of this, but I don't know where I placed them. Oh, there. Okay, so because this one I love, because when I have to go somewhere, I can easily just bring it, right? And of course, you have your Better Press inks. So they are actually dye inks, okay, with a little bit of a tweak in the formulation, okay, so that it actually somehow resembles a little bit of that. It doesn't dry too fast. Okay, that's perfect for letter pressing. Okay, so this is the Better Press ink. If you want to check out what other inks you can use for better pressing, Lynn of LV Handcrafted actually created an awesome video about the different kinds of inks you can use for your Better Press letter press. Okay, so my favorite things, okay, it's actually a hybrid ink. So it's an all-purpose ink, okay, so it blends the best of both pigment and dye inks into one ink pad. Okay, so that's why if you are unsure, okay, you can get a hybrid ink to start with. Okay, so you have MFT and you have your Memento. Okay, so this one I use best for Copic. Okay, this one I use for watercolor. If you're gonna watercolor or if you're gonna color with Copic your images. All right. And then, of course, the Memento can also come in like teardrop-shaped inks like this. Okay, so just a bit of a warning, my friends. You don't need to have all the colors of inks in the world. Let's say a specific line may have like 72 colors. You don't need to buy all of them. All right, so you can always just start with black and white, or the colors of the rainbow. One red, one orange, one yellow, one blue. Start with just those, okay? until, like, if you really need to, then that's the only time that you I really suggest that you buy more. Okay, but make sure that you have dye inks first. That's where you start. And then you could, if you want to do more techniques later on for stamping and blending, then you can add into your collection a bit of pigment and hybrid inks. Okay, and of course, we have your solvent inks. Okay, so this is your stays on. So this is what it looks like now, and it comes in ink pads like this. All right, so these are for non-porous. All right, so if you're gonna stamp on glass, plastic, anything that is non-porous or metal, okay, so it used to come in like this. Okay, if you can see, there's an additional cover because it really evaporates because there is solvent. Okay, there is solvent in it. See, it's already damage because of, remember, there's a solvent, so after a long while it does, so but still it can be used. I still use that. I will just refill. All right, so that's your stays on. This one is perfectly okay because it's newer. This one is very, very old. It's still okay. And of course, you have your distress inks and your distress oxides. Okay, so it is just recent, very, very recent, that they introduced the distress oxide in the ink cubes. Okay, before it always came in this size. Okay, so I do have the full collection for the distress oxides simply because this is really my go-to ink when it comes to if I want to do a lot of different kinds of techniques. So I love the distress oxide. Although the distress oxide line, my friends, does have a little bit of a chalky feel to it. Okay, when you use it, but the ink has a more vibrant, opaque, color. Okay, so those are your specialty inks. All right. So before I move to the next topic, let me just check. Okay, what is everybody saying in the chat? Okay, we are all dying to see the dice. Roy, how can you come up with these jokes in an instant? I love it. You are so intelligent. Yes, Wims like me prefer the cubes. It's easy to store, and yes, it's cheaper. Yes, also for me. Yes, so that we can get more colors, right? The Catherine Puller and Concord and Ninth are the juiciest for me. Yes, but be careful with the Catherine Puller Black because you know what that did to my stamp wheel, right? So it's very hard to remove. Hi, Wims, and hi, Heda. I miss crafting and scrapbooking. I miss my stamps and my inks. Yes, Heda May is from the planner community. I met her in the chat from the planner episode. So thanks so much for dropping by, Heda May. Yes, sometimes life just gets in the way, right? Like I have been gone for about almost 3 months as well. So that's why in here now in August, I'm trying to do an everyday thing just to catch up. I've been gone for a while as well because I have work. I had to focus on work for a bit. All right. So how do I store my inks? Okay. So now let's go to storage. Now that you have what you need in terms of inks, now how do you store them? Okay. Just like any other crafty tool or material that you have, okay, proper storage will ensure that you can have them or it can last the longest. Okay. Again, they don't last forever. All right. Especially inks, right? Paints, okay, this do not last forever. I've learned the hard way, right? That's why I now, if I'm, as long as I know I'm not gonna use it, I'm not even gonna buy the big container. I'm just gonna buy the small one if it's just for a specific project, especially for mixed media, because they can really dry up. Right. And of course, depending on how you stored it or where you are in the world, it can also do I call this? It can also help you determine how long it's gonna last for you. Okay, so first and foremost, make sure that you have a container that is flat and airtight, and then you store them in drawers, bins, or airtight containers if you can. Okay, so earlier on, you saw how I actually stored my containers. I mean my inks, but it took me a long while to actually come up with a system that works for me, right? So do find which one works for you. Of course, it will depend on like, do you really have a space to store them just in case you have a lot, but since we're focusing on beginner, okay, so I am thinking that for storage you probably just need one, like this container, because okay, we don't want you buying all the things. Let's start with just the very basics, right? And then you store them based on color family or grouping. So organizing them by color or ink type for quick access. All right. And then, okay, portable cases, right? Like the one I have, okay? Because the nice thing about putting them in portable cases is that if you do need to bring them somewhere, maybe to the office, maybe you're going on a vacation for a while, but you still want to, do a little bit of crafting, or you want to, demo something, you're going to demo for a whatever event, right? So putting them in portable cases would be an advantage. And of course, it's inks. These are inks, so avoid, if you can, direct sunlight. So anything that has, color, even paintings, right? So it's definitely affected by light. So try to avoid direct sunlight. So don't put it near the window where certain days, certain time of the day, it can have direct sunlight. So always put them in drawers away from sun. Okay. And of course, how do you take care of your inks? Okay. When I think I want to, okay, I will get it later. Okay. I'm not sure if I want to show you, but I actually, after the pandemic, I tried to revisit all the inks I have. Sad to say, even those that I tried to revive, there's actually a way to revive if there's still, if it's the ink is still there, and then you just have to reactivate because most of them are water based anyway. You can do so, and I'll tell you how you do that. But sometimes really it's really time to say goodbye, right? So that's why I said don't buy unless you really think that you are going to be able to use it. Otherwise, might as well just give it to somebody or sell it. Okay, rather than one day you'll realize, oh no, you can no longer use it, right? It would have been better if at least somebody could have used it. So use the correct re-inker for the ink type, okay? Not any kind of black ink is okay for use to re-ink. All right? So there are specific re-inkers for specific brands and types. All right? I'll show you as well in a little bit. Of course, you need to clean your stamps with a stamp cleaner. Okay, so if you don't have a stamp cleaner, then you can always, use soap depending on the ink type. So most of this, okay, are actually water based, okay, except for the solvent one. So you can use alcohol for that one. Okay, so for water based ink, just a baby wipe or a piece of cloth that's a little bit wet. Okay, so and then for solvent inks, use specific cleaners. Okay. So, and then uses of inks for paper crafting. So we use the inks, the ones I showed you, for specifically for the technique called stamping and blending. All right. For stamping, it's mainly used for card making and scrapbooking, but it can also be used for other crafts. But that's the main purpose and use of stamping. And then you have blending, okay, creating backgrounds with blending brushes or sponges. So remember the one that Wims mentioned earlier, smooshing, right? So that's another technique where you can actually blend different kinds of, special inks, hybrid inks, okay, or water-based inks, and come up with an amazing background. All right. And then, of course, you have watercoloring, right? So you can actually use these dye inks as watercolor by pressing onto an acrylic block and adding a little bit of water, and then you can use that directly, okay? So I know if you've been following for a while, you've seen how we do that. Or if you are not familiar with this, don't worry because we're going to be doing this in a little while. Maybe, hopefully next week. All right. So, and then of course, you have edge distressing. So, we can actually use these inks to lightly brush, okay, ink around the paper edges for dimension, right? So, you give a little bit of a depth and dimension to your project. So, it's not, very monotonous. It's just, it looks very plain, right? And of course, you have layered stamping, okay? So, you build up images with different shades. That's why I show you earlier on when I buy, normally I buy in like twos or threes, let's say four different kinds of pink, four different kinds of red, four different kinds of yellow, right? For blending purposes. Okay. All right, so these are the examples of some popular inks. You have for dye, I showed you earlier on, Memento, Tuxedo Black. Okay, so if you do want to come up with your basic collection, so this is what I can suggest, that one. Okay, get that one of that. Okay, Altenew Crisp Dye Ink, Distress Ink. Okay, and then for pigment, Versafine Clear or Hero Arts Pigment Ink for the white one. All right, and of course, your hybrid, you can get your Lawn Fawn Jet Black and MFT Hybrid. All right. So there you go. And then for solvent, of course, it stays on jet black. Okay, and the stays on metallics. But if you are really not gonna be using, okay, the solvent ink for any project in the future, I suggest that you don't buy because they really dry up super fast. Okay, because the solvent evaporates. All right, and of course you have your specialty inks, so the distress oxides, which I love so much, and alcohol inks and chalk inks. I forgot to show you some of the alcohol inks, but this one, normally you don't use indoors, you have to use it outdoors, and they come in bottles like this, not in ink pads. Okay, because to use this, you actually use an applicator. Okay, so but this is what it looks like. And this, you need an alcohol blender, okay, to actually use it. Okay, and then of course, there is the introduction of alloy to come up with really nice rivers, we call it rivers, right? And of course, you have some other mixatives, okay, for the alcohol inks, okay? But guys, I'm really not an artist, so I can use it, I can do it, but I cannot create really amazing projects out of this one. But we have crafters and artists in the community like Nenette Samson Madero, okay, of My Little Attic Studio, and of course Wims in the chat, and one of the best alcohol ink artists we have here in the Philippines, KM. Okay, so KM Heartmade. If you've not checked her out, please do so. All right. Okay, so some do's and don'ts. Oops. Okay. Oh, when I was doing that, I wasn't here. I hope so. I hope not. Anyways, do's and don'ts. Remember, close the lid. All right. So sometimes when we're working, like when I'm actually, crafting and at the same time doing my live stream, I often I open everything and then sometimes I forget to close it. Right. So that would actually, dry up faster your ink. So try to cover one at a time and use one at a time. Okay. So you don't mix them up as well. And then, Mami Lala, do you store your inks this way or that way? All right. So actually, truth be said, okay, I even, in the olden days, I actually even stored my inks like this, upside down. This is the right side, right? Right side up. This is right side up, right? So what I used to do was to store them like that. Okay? The purpose of which is that so all the inks will not get stuck at the bottom. Okay, so that when you use your ink pad, it's always juicy. But then when I research, according to the manufacturers, it isn't really so. Okay? So sometimes, especially your pigment inks, if you put it like this, sometimes it would even leak out, right? So and but if sometimes like Tim Holtz, he said his distress oxides, he has a container like this, like the metal containers. He stores his inks like this, right, on its side, and it's okay. So again, try it out for size, especially if you have issue with space and you have a lot. So storing them horizontally might you might need more space, but if you would store them vertically, then it might be better in terms of space, using space, using up the space that you have. So check it out. But there's that there's no truth to the fact that you have to store them upside down. All right. So it can actually sometimes even make your inks leak. Okay. Anyways, at any rate, you can always have. Oh, I forgot to show you reinkers. Okay. So how do you do inking? Okay. Let me see. All right. So let's re-ink my MFT. Okay. Or my memento. Let's say my memento. Okay. So there are reinkers. Okay. So normally it's the black. I only buy the black because it's the black that I always, so if you can see, my reinkers are mostly of my favorite ones. So I have the Gina K Amalgam, the Stays on Jet Black, the MFT Black. Okay, and of course my Versamark. Okay, and my Archival Jet Black. So these are the only reinkers I have. For the others, I have yet to reink. And I have had this for several decades. But I really have pigment inks that weren't really, they're very, very cheap when I bought them, but they actually also aren't good quality, and those didn't last long. But those that are really a good quality, they'll last you decades. All right. So these are my reinkers. So how do you do it? Okay. So where's my memento? Okay, hold on. Let's look for my memento. This are okay. This my VersaFine. Okay, there you go. That's my memento reinker. Okay, so how do you reink? Okay, so to reink, okay, of course. Okay, so you open your pad. Okay, and then your reinker has a tip like this. Okay, so what you do is you just press, and then the ink will go out, and then you just do like that. Did you see? Okay, it actually sip through very, very fast. It means that my ink pad is actually very thirsty. Okay, so you see, immediately it disappears. Okay, and since most of the time we use the middle part when we stamp, so I add a little bit more in the middle. So guys, remember what I mentioned earlier? Make sure that the ink that you are using is for that specific ink. Okay, so it is for, the reinker for that specific ink pad. All right, because not all inks are the same. All right, so I cannot, highlight that enough. Okay, so that's basically how you ink. And now it's good to go. Okay, you're good to go. Okay, so that's how easy it is. So again, for the reinkers, I only buy my most used ones, and mostly that's, except for the Versamark, everything is the black one or the hybrid one. All right, so let me just check the chat. Okay. Okay, have I missed it? Oh, Anne. Hi, Anne. Good morning. Okay, is Bitty Penny done? I know a lot of people were in Bitty Penny's earlier, because this is actually normally Bitty Penny's schedule from about 7 p.m. my time to about this time. And Anne is saying hi to everybody. Okay, and Wim says she stores them on its side, but so far they are okay. Hope nothing leaks. All right. So normally dye inks, no issue. It's the pigment inks that might leak. But then again, as I mentioned, when I researched, manufacturers said you can store them anyway, any which way, and it's okay. But then it's also depending on where you live. So we are here in the Philippines, very humid and hot. So sometimes it becomes a little bit more runny if you are in compared to those who actually live in a country where you have cooler temperatures. And Wim says, I have to find a cheaper version of that tin can, right? I'll show you Wim's. Okay, is it going to be another episode for the fluids and sprays? Yes. Okay, so this is only for stamping and blending. So for the fluids and sprays, I consider that part of the mixed media. So that will follow, all right? So going back to our PowerPoint. All right, so do's, continuing on. Okay, so do label the side of the ink pads for easy color picking. All right, a lot of people do that, but since I have too many and a lot, so I actually don't do that. But one thing I did, okay, is to actually come up with something like this. Okay, so for example, my lawn fawn. Okay, hold on. I don't want to see that. All right. So example, my lawn fawn. Okay. So if you can see, it says, okay, so what I do instead of putting labels individually, the container, okay, actually this container, my friends, okay, I used to put my inks, my cubes in something like this, an acrylic container. For one, because it's stackable, but it's it's what do you call this? The partition is exactly like that for the size of the cube. Okay, you can stack it, and this is just from a dollar store for those who are in the U.S. Here in the Philippines, it's from Daiso or Japan Home, right? So, and it used to be only 88 pesos. When was that? So long ago, decades ago. Now I think it's 118, 100, something like that, more than 100 pesos now, but used to be only 88. So this is how I store all my square ones, my distress oxides and distress inks, because it's perfect. And then remember I told you earlier on, you store them based on like color family. So right when you're gonna blend, you can see, oh, okay, these are my reds, these are part of my greens, there's more of them, but I just wanted to show you samples so that you can see. And then these are the blues, okay, and these are the purples, okay. And then what I do is on the sides, okay, I don't actually do the labeling like per ink pad. So this one says distress inks. Okay, maybe I will just remove, I'm afraid because it might fall. Right, so okay, it says distress inks 6E 25. All right, so because that time I only had 25 of this container, so you can come up with your way of finding out how you will know that something is missing, especially if we craft with others, right? So, and then they bring along their stuff as well. And so you will put out your stuff, they'll put out their stuff, and sometimes it gets mixed, right? So it's nice that you have, individual labels if you do that, or your container will have a label. So if something is missing. All right. So if you can find stackable layers, that's better because it will use up less space. And I like that it's acrylic because it's transparent, so I can easily see what color it is. And then for the cubes, which I actually have more ink cubes than the real, the complete big ones, right? So from those kinds, okay, I transition to this. Okay, so the nice thing about this, even if it falls, okay, so the ink is still intact. Okay, and you can open it, okay, and each of the inks has an individual container as well. So let's say if I only want this set, Okay, I will just get this. All right, and then I can easily get this and then remove and then put back. Okay, and then I put again my code. So this is Lon Fon 1 of 4, meaning I have 4 of these. Okay, so in each one there should be 2, 4, 6, 8, right? But I have 4. So this is 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, 4 of 4. And of course, I arrange them by color. So when I'm working, okay, I can easily get it from the drawer. All of these inks are actually to my left and to the right underneath my Alex drawer. So I just pull it out whenever I need to, and then after I can easily put it back. All right, so that's how I store them. Like this one is, okay, this is Versa. Okay, so Versa color. So it says 1 of 3, so I need to have 3 of this. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so how about Gina K? All right, so I should have 1 of 5, 2 of 5, 3 of 5, 4 of 5, and 5 of 5. Okay, so come up with a system that works for you. And then, look for containers that may not actually be exactly the same, okay, but something that, can keep them safe. You can, it's portable, okay, and of course, if you can find one that's cheap, better, right? So there. So that's how I actually store my inks. I would love to have something like this, the metal ones, but these are not cheap. Okay, because these are archival ink containers, really. These are not cheap. Okay, I got this because I won this. Okay, I won this from one of the events. Okay, so I do have, so instead, because the archival inks, okay, and where's the archival that I have? Okay, because the archival inks and the spellbinders, okay, have actually the same container, right? So instead of my archival, okay, so I store my archivals on this one, okay, and then I put my letterpress, better press, because I only have 9 inks actually for my better press letterpress. All right, so you can come up with this. So this is what Wims was saying, looking for an alternative for this because this is actually a little bit pricey. But it's just like this one, the plastic one that I have. It basically has the same purpose, right? So it has a cover. If it falls, it's not gonna, your inks are still intact. It's portable. You can carry it. But this is a little bit more expensive and this is cheaper. Okay, so find an alternative as long as, you can protect your inks. Okay, and if it's portable, it's better. Okay, so next, okay, and of course, do clean stamps or your stamp pads after each use to avoid color contamination, especially if you're doing different techniques, right? So sometimes inadvertently, you might introduce a different color, okay, onto a specific ink pad. So just, slowly wipe it with, wet tissue or even a dry one, okay, until it actually gets, it's not contaminated anymore. All right. So next one, the don'ts, okay? So for the don'ts, don't press stamps too hard. Okay, because actually, this is more for stamping already, right? But at any rate, okay, because your ink pads will last longer. Did you see what happened to what was that? I think it was one of the stays-ons, right? So because when I stamp, when I use it, I really and sometimes I drag it like that. So eventually the top layer might get destroyed. Yes. Okay. The mica spray, distress spritz. Yes, that's more for mixed media. So we will go to that. Yes. See? Wims knows all of the things. And we have Dawn. Hi, Dawn. How are you, my friend? Miss you. I don't have any of those, so I'm interested to know different types of liquids or sprays. Okay, we will go through it, Wims. As I said, this series, this whole month, we will go back to the basics, right? And it's amazing that there are a lot of you in the chat who actually are not really very basic anymore, and so can actually, help out the others through the chat. So please put down some, tips that you might have that I didn't mention, right? So that if somebody who is a beginner eventually sees this by chance or it was recommended to them, that they can also see what the chat have shared. Hi, Wims from Dawn. I have to find that in Daiso or Japan stores. Yes, this one, Wims. This one is Daiso. Okay. The one in Daiso for this one is very thin. So I like the Japan Home because it's very thick. Okay. And this has lasted. I've had this for more than 20 years, my friends. Okay. I have only one that has cracked this side because it fell from a very high place. Okay, but still alive. Just one. Everything else still alive. And for those who actually have seen, I would carry some of this to the center or to the club hub and back home, and then they have gone everywhere, right? So, and they're still good to go, right? So there are containers, Wims, that don't have like this inner inserts, right? So it's only like this, but that's fine as well. But I like the ones that have this one because it makes it, easier to store. Okay, and it's, tighter, so I like it. I'm waiting for the mini distress oxides to be available here. Yes, I never thought that it would ever happen because I remember they said that Tim Holt said we will never come out with the in cubes for the oxide. So I was super happy that they actually released that. Although I already have the complete set in the regular size, right? But that's nice because now it's easier to transport, right? Because if you have the ink cubes, you don't need a lot of space, or it's not too heavy to carry. So yes, we are waiting for it, Wims. Yes. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. Okay, and yes, my picks. So for my dies, so I actually love my Altenew and my Mementos. For pigment, of course, my Versa Clear, Versa Fine. Okay, actually, I love everything. And I'm trying to, again, it depends on what you want to do, right? So, okay, and then, of course, your hybrid is your MFT for the black, and of course, your distress oxides, inks, embossing, Versamark, and specialty, of course, the Distress series. So my challenge for you, my dear friends who are actually just starting out with paper crafting, pick out just, one ink, okay? Or for those who are, if you are actually a seasoned crafter, okay, the challenge for you would be to pick just one of the inks that you haven't used in a while, okay, and create a simple background or a stamped card. Okay, and check it out. So that's how you start. You don't buy all of the inks and then, start. Just start with one, okay, and then check out how you like it. Okay, so, because in the beginning, when I started with stamping, I didn't like it because I couldn't come up with a crisp image, and I was supposed to use it for like commissioned works or for my business. It was really bad, and then came the stamping platform, and that was really a game changer. And from then on, stamping ain't so difficult anymore. And of course, the advent of many techniques, thanks to the likes of Jennifer McGuire, right? So Kay Werner, they have introduced so many Team Halts. They have introduced so many amazing, techniques that we can do with just simply our inks. All right. So tomorrow we are going to be doing embossing folders. All right. And a little bit about heat embossing as well, since it's embossing. So let's just call it embossing day. All right. So for tomorrow, the basics of embossing. amazing. So please don't forget to share, okay, this video if you can, and use the hashtag craft everyday in August, or hashtag CEDA, CEDA, or hashtag CEDA 2025, so we can see your beautiful inky creations. All right. Yes. So please, again, okay, where is that? Okay, here at the back. Wims, do you see? All right. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, yeah, it's in the other side. Right. So I have there, what do you call this? A painting of done by Wims for my 50th birthday, like 2 years ago. All right. So please, by the way, don't forget to like. All right. And of course, share this awesome video and hit that notification bell so you always get notified whenever I have a new video, a live stream, or even a shorts. By the way, tomorrow, guys, I'm going to be coming up, okay, so about midnight, actually, later, okay, I will be posting a new video. I know it's just a photo of my entry and what I did for the mood board challenge for Not Too Shabby. So if you have not checked out that challenge, I highly suggest that you do so. Get on to Not Too Shabby shop.com, go to their blog and see how you can actually join the mood board challenge. It's for the whole month of August. So it's an every month thing, right? So I'll show you what I did, and hopefully it inspires you to start with your own challenge, join the challenge. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you like this kinds of videos and other crafty videos and shorts and live streams. Please don't forget to subscribe. There you go. Okay. So, yes, and I'm Mommy Guide on all the socials. Yes, and if you could see that in the, while you're watching now, you can see some products like down below. Those are actually affiliate links. So if ever you click on those or you actually buy through those, I do get a little bit of a commission. And everything that comes from that actually helps out in creating more content for the channel. So I thank you so much in advance. And that doesn't cost you anything extra, by the way. All right. So with that, okay, so let's go back to the chat. Yes, thank you so much, Dawn. Miss you, my friend. So, Dawn, I actually will be doing one on art journal, and I would love, 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 love to have you in the chat if ever, because I'm sure that you can give us a lot of advice. Yes, Wims, thank you. Yes, nowadays when I go live, this is a functionality of YouTube for those who are actually in the Philippines, right? I know that this has been rolled out in the US already, but for us in the Philippines, it just got rolled out about a few months ago, I think 2 months ago. So YouTube Shopping Philippines has started. And so Wims, I know that you are already a monetized channel. So you can actually do this as well, my friend. So whatever you use in your videos, it doesn't have to be a live stream. In your videos, you can add the products through Shopee. Okay, so that Shopee is their affiliate. There you go. And of course, speaking of the mood board challenge, we have Jamie here. Good morning. Good morning, Jamie. Yes, this is my craft everyday in August, where I will feature the basics of crafting. So for today, we talked about all about inks, right? So tomorrow we're going to be doing embossing, everything embossing. So, right? So they're not too shabby. I hope that you can join us in the challenge this month. You still have several weeks, so you can still, upload your mood board projects on the nottoshabby.com blog, shop blog. Okay, hi, hello, Dinky. Hello, my friend Jana. Good morning, good morning. It's okay, Jana. I know there's actually several of us who are live right now, right? So I'm still grateful that you guys are able to make it. All right, love to art journal at times, right? Yes, at times, like every week. So, right, so guys, if you are into art journaling, I can I really, really suggest that you join Dawn and T of Not Afraid of Color. Dawn is the Crafty Vice Edge. They really showcase a ton of, art journaling techniques and product showcases, right? So it's amazing. I'd actually learned a lot from just watching, their show. That's every Friday nights for me. And I think that is Friday morning for them. Yes. Good morning, Jenna. I'll try that po. Does that work on shorts too? Yes, Wims. The YouTube shopping works on shorts, on live streams, on videos, and you can even go back to your previous videos, your old videos. Okay, and if you use, some paints, like you use Ohuhu, right, most of the time. Okay, you can even choose the store you want to get affiliate links from, right? So I hope, I actually ask Shopee because I'm part of, the create as a content creator. And once you get monetized, they do give you like a manager, a YouTube manager. And they've been encouraging us to actually, use it more. And I ask, is it possible for me to link, US products? So for now, they said no. It's regional. So the products that I can tag right now in the product section for this video is actually the ones only here in the Philippines. Sometimes other countries like Indonesia, I think for some creators it shows up. I don't know why, but supposedly only Philippines, right? So anyway, try it out. So if you are from the Philippines, you are a monetized channel. Yes, YouTube shopping affiliate is open for all of us. Now, for our friends in the US, I have yet to update my Amazon shop, but I will try because this is really everything about the basics, right? So we finished basic tools, paper, die cutting machines. Of course, we have today inks. So tomorrow we are gonna be focused on embossing. All right. Okay, so I think no more comments, no more questions. So with that, again, I thank you so much for joining me tonight. Okay, morning for you guys. Okay, for another episode of Craft Every Day in August. So this is going to be a whole month series. So I'm excited to see you once again tomorrow for another Crafty Nights. With that, have a great rest of the day and see you tomorrow. Bye!